Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and Giallo enthusiasts. I am your host, Tanner Leeser, here for The King in Giallo, and it's that time for another Giallo film guide for Halloween. I'll be spotlighting 5 more Giallo films that I think make for great Halloween viewing. 2 years ago, I rounded up 5 picks that leaned harder into horror and functioned more like slasher films, and last year I highlighted 5 gialli that I felt were standout whodunnits. This year, the category I'm sticking with is psychological thrillers. Now, before I begin, I'll say up front that with only 5 picks, there are plenty of films being left off this year's list. That doesn't mean these are the best, just the ones that come to mind for me. I also tried to avoid choices that could have easily fit into a Slashers Part 2 or Whodunnits Part 2 video. Some of these definitely have elements of both, but not as strongly as others I considered. As always, I invite you to share your own 5 Halloween Giallo recommendations in the comments, whether you go unthemed or stick with this year's focus, psychological thrillers. Okay, in no particular order, here are 5 good old-fashioned Giallo psychological thrillers to watch for Halloween. Number 1, Libido, 1965 by Vittorio Salerno and Ernesto Gastaldi. This is one of the greatest proto-Giallo films in my opinion, and the only Giallo film directed by the great Giallo film writer Ernesto Gastaldi, though here he goes by the pseudonym Julian Barry Storff. The black and white of the film telegraphs its horror nature, and it's brilliantly acted by its 4-person ensemble made up of Giancarlo Giannini, Luciano Pigozzi, aka Alan Collins, Dominique Boschero, and Gastaldi's wife and co-writer of the film, Mara Merrill. Known for penning some of the greatest Giallo scripts ever written, Gastaldi brings his fascination with guilt, repression, and inherited madness to the forefront. Libido traps its 4 characters inside a remote villa where childhood trauma and sexual paranoia intertwine as a young man returns to the home where his father committed a terrible act. Every frame feels tight and voyeuristic, with the camera lingering just long enough to make you second guess what you've seen. The tension builds with each psychological game between the characters until you can't tell who's manipulating whom, or why. There are shades of Le Diabolique and Psycho in the setup, but the atmosphere and pacing are distinctly Italian. It's small scale, intimate, and unnervingly effective, and a perfect reminder that Gastaldi's mind for psychological torment wasn't just limited to his scripts. It was something he could bring to life visually, too. Number 2, All the Colors of the Dark, 1972 by Sergio Martino. If Rosemary's Baby had been filtered through the kaleidoscope of Italian psychedelia, you'd get All the Colors of the Dark. This was Sergio Martino's 3rd Giallo film and the first of 2 he would release in 1972. Edwidge Fenech stars as a woman spiraling into paranoia after a traumatic miscarriage, stalked by a blue-eyed stranger, and lured into a satanic cult that promises healing. Dominique Boschero appears here as her deceased mother, whose presence haunts Fenech through memory and dream. This psychological connection adds a deeply personal layer to the film's horror and plays heavily into 2 of its most striking nightmare sequences. Visions so vividly edited and scored that they blur the line between surrealism and psychosis. Martino turns the entire movie into a disorienting descent into fear where reality and delusion melt together through mirror shots, dream logic, and Giallo-esque eroticism. The nightmare imagery is among the best the genre ever produced. Flashes of color, sound, and surreal terror. Bruno Nicolai's haunting score and the London locations add an atmosphere that's both modern and surreal, blending swinging 60s glamour with occult menace. It's not about who did it, but is it even happening? And that ambiguity, that collapse of reality into delusion, is what makes this one of the most definitive psychological gialli. Number 3, Footprints on the Moon, 1975 by Luigi Bazzoni. This is Giallo's closest brush with existential science fiction and one of the most hauntingly melancholic films of the genre. Florinda Bolkan plays Alice, a woman plagued by memory gaps and recurring dreams of astronauts abandoned on the moon. Bazzoni's direction and Vittorio Storaro's cinematography transform every empty hotel corridor and sun-bleached piazza into an emotional labyrinth. Some might not consider this to be a solid Giallo entry in the canon, but I absolutely do. In my opinion, Luigi Bazzoni is the most underrated Giallo director. He only made 3 Giallo films, in fact, but each of them deserves to be seen. The Possessed, The Fifth Chord, and this, his third and final Giallo. His first, The Possessed, could easily qualify as both a masterpiece whodunit and a psychological thriller, while The Fifth Chord remains a fan favorite for its stunning cinematography and precision direction, and was included 2 years ago in my slashers pick for Halloween. Footprints is definitely a slow burn, but it has one of the greatest psychological endings in all of Giallo cinema. One that manages to be tragic, revealing, and quietly devastating all at once. There's also a 1972 Giallo film, Eye in the Labyrinth, which is very similar in theme, tone, and plot, though that one is more overtly Giallo in its execution. Footprints, however, remains its own strange, poetic entity. Every frame feels like the waking aftermath of a forgotten dream, and the way the narrative circles back on itself mirrors Alice's crumbling sense of identity. It's a film that rewards patience, contemplation, and surrender to its hypnotic pacing. Number 4. A Lizard in a Woman's Skin, 1971 by Lucio Fulci. Before he became the godfather of gore, Lucio Fulci delivered one of the most ambitious psychological thrillers in Italian cinema. I continue to believe that Fulci is one of the greatest Giallo writers of the early years of the genre, and A Lizard in a Woman's Skin is right up there with Perversion Story. This film dives deep into sexual repression, the ethics of desire, and the fragility of sanity. Florinda Bolkan, once again proving she's the queen of the psychological Giallo, plays a politician's wife whose violent dreams seem to bleed into reality. The film's surreal imagery, groundbreaking practical effects, so convincing they nearly got Fulci arrested, and Ennio Morricone's seductive score create a feverish nightmare of guilt and temptation. It contains some of the greatest and most inventive nightmare imagery in the entire genre, easily better than the nightmares in All the Colors of the Dark. The recurring images of bodies, birds, and surreal color gradients become visual representations of Bolkan's subconscious guilt. It's Fulci's most sophisticated work, a psychoanalytic puzzle box drenched in color, dread, and delirium, and it stands as proof that he could balance psychological nuance and visual excess long before his gore-era reputation took over. And number 5. Short Night of Glass Dolls, 1971 by Aldo Lado. This is not only one of the greatest film debuts in Giallo history, it's one of the greatest film debuts, period. Aldo Lado, like Bazzoni, only made a few Giallo films, but each one is a masterclass, and here's another director who deserves far more credit. Short Night of Glass Dolls begins with a corpse on a morgue slab, and the twist is that the man isn't dead. Paralyzed but conscious, he mentally retraces the events that led him there. The film is one of the most atmospheric and tragic entries in the genre, filled with haunting imagery and political undertones. Lado's Prague is a cold, ornate labyrinth where corruption festers beneath elegance, and Ennio Morricone's mournful score amplifies every pulse of dread. It's also a rare case where an in medias res framing device actually works to perfection. I usually hate that technique, but here, Lado uses it in a masterclass fashion. The flashbacks don't just fill in the blanks, they recontextualize everything we think we know, creating a suffocating sense of inevitability. This is Giallo as Kafkaesque horror, a meditation on helplessness and control disguised as a murder mystery. It closes on one of the most chilling and despairing final sequences in all of Giallo. Less a twist than a cruel realization that some systems, once entered, cannot be escaped. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this little Halloween video. I invite you to drop your own selections down in the comments. This month has been another busy one for me, and I ended up moving across states, got a new car, still have a wedding to attend, and a new job to start, but I really wanted to keep this Halloween tradition going. I had planned to have a lot more videos out by now, but honestly, I needed to take a bit of time for myself. We still have the Gialli tally for A White Dress for Mariella coming soon, and since Vinegar Syndrome recently gave us Death Falls Lightly, which is also a 1972 Giallo film, I decided that that one deserves a Gialli tally too. After that, I'll be bringing you the best of Giallo films for 1972. Beyond that, I've got a few other Giallo-themed videos in the works, but I won't be diving into 1973 in Giallo until 2026. Going into 2026, I may slow the schedule down a bit, like I've said the past couple years, but this time I really mean it. It's basically become a full-time job making 3 videos a week, and since YouTube has been making my life a bit of a nightmare lately, claiming I don't create my own videos, it just doesn't make sense to keep burning myself out. I'll still aim for weekly uploads, maybe even 2 a week, which is still more than most content creators can say. And if you want to support what I do, the best way is through Patreon, since YouTube has dropped me from the partner program for now. Regardless, I appreciate every single one of you who watches, comments, subscribes, or supports The King in Giallo. Thank you all so much for helping me keep this genre alive. This is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo, and if nothing else, I'll see you next time.
Hysterical blindness. Not the first case I've seen, but it's not too common either. A woman's eyes weren't meant to see such things, you understand?
Is it permanent? Will she look that way forever?